Alan Watts stumbled upon something huge, something most people drift through life without ever realizing. He saw a disturbing paradox woven into the fabric of how we live our lives. The more available you become to everyone else, the less you actually exist for yourself. And get this, the less you exist for yourself, the less you actually exist for anyone at all. It's as if you're completely draining yourself, trying to fill up everyone else's cup, leaving yours empty. Think about that for a second. Really let it sink in. You're always available. Always responding to texts, emails, calls. Always. Present when someone needs a favor. Always saying yes when you should be screaming no. And deep down, you feel like you're fading away. Like every time you show up for someone else, a little piece of you just disappears. Alan Watts would argue that this isn't generosity, this is the ego disguised as kindness. It's the fear of rejection dressed up as virtue. It's the illusion that if you're available enough, you'll be loved enough. But the truth is, the opposite is almost always true. Over the next few minutes, you're going to discover why the philosophy of Zen reveals that true transformation happens when you become strategically unavailable. You'll understand why the people you most respect, admire, and desperately want to be around are exactly the ones who aren't always available. And you'll learn how effortless action, also known as the flow state, teaches you that absence isn't abandonment, it's concentrated presence. If you feel like you've lost yourself trying to be everything to everyone, this realization, this shift, could change everything. Because Alan Watts proved something that Western culture actively hides. Being constantly available doesn't make you valuable, it makes you invisible. Society has sold you a brutal lie. It's told you that to be loved, you need to be always present, always accessible, always ready to drop everything and run. It's made you think that saying no is selfish, that setting boundaries is cold, that disappearing for a little while is abandonment, and you bought it. You became the friend who always replies instantly, the partner who's always there, the child who always answers the phone no matter the hour, the coworker who always jumps in to help. You were proud of it until you started feeling that strange, unsettling emptiness, that feeling that you're everywhere, but nowhere at all. You exist for everyone else, but you don't exist for yourself. People hit you up when they need something, but don't think about you when they don't. You're useful, but not desired. You're convenient, but not valued. Alan Watts called this the illusion of the separate self, trying to validate itself through constant approval. The ego believes that if it disappears for even a moment, it will be forgotten. So it stays hyper-present, hyper-available, hyper-responsive, and in the process, it completely dissolves. But here's the paradox that Alan Watts revealed. People don't value what's always available. They value what's rare, what's scarce, what takes effort to access, not because they're shallow, but because that's how the human mind works. That's how nature itself functions. Observe water. It doesn't chase after anything. It simply flows. Where it's meant to flow and retreats from where it shouldn't be. It's not always available to every container. It fills what's empty and leaves the rest. And exactly because of that, water is the most powerful force in nature. You, on the other hand, are chasing after everything. You're trying to fill every container. You're pouring yourself into places that don't retain you. And by doing that, you dilute yourself. You lose density. You lose strength. You lose presence. But hold on, because the real paradox is coming. Alan Watts spent years studying Eastern philosophy, and he discovered something the West pretends not to know. In Zen, there's a concept called effortless action, or sometimes called the flow state, doing without forcing. Being present without being always available, effortless action, isn't laziness. It isn't indifference. It isn't selfishness. It's the wisdom of understanding that forcing your presence is as destructive as forcing anything else. When you force your availability, you create dependence, not connection. You create obligation, not desire. You create habit, not value. Think about the people who have left a mark on your life, the ones you never forget, the ones whose presence you feel even when they're not around. Were they always available, always responding instantly, always there for you no matter what? No. They were rare. They showed up when it mattered. They were truly present when they were present. And when they weren't, you felt their absence, because absence can only be felt when presence has density. But you're so available that your presence has no density. You're so present that your absence goes unnoticed. People have gotten used to you always being there. So, when you're not, they simply move on, because you've trained them not to miss you. Alan Watts would say you've become like air, essential but invisible, necessary but not perceived. And it's only when the air vanishes that you realize it was there. But until then, you breathe without thinking. Do you want to be the air, or do you want to be the storm that arrives, transforms everything, and leaves, leaving everyone remembering that it passed through? There's a moment in Alan Watts' life that perfectly illustrates this. He used to give packed lectures, thousands of people wanting to hear him speak, and he could have given lectures every single day. He could have become completely, utterly accessible. But he didn't. He chose when to speak. He chose where to be. He created scarcity, not out of manipulation, but out of wisdom, because he knew that if he was always available, his words would lose weight, his ideas would be diluted, his presence would become commonplace. And what happened? His lectures became even more valuable. People waited months to hear him. They traveled miles. They cherished every single minute. Why? Because he wasn't always there. He was rare. And what's rare is precious. Now, think about you. You're always. They're always responding to that text in seconds, always canceling your plans to be available, always putting others in front of yourself. And what do you get in return? You get taken for granted. You get sought after only when it's convenient. You get valued until the next more interesting person comes along, because you've taught people that you'll always be there. So why would they value you now? Alan Watts knew this. He understood that the human mind values what's scarce and devalues what's abundant. No matter how good that thing is, if it's always available, it loses value. It's a law of nature. It's a law of psychology. It's a law of life. But there's one detail that changes everything. And this is where most people get lost. Ceasing to be available doesn't mean disappearing. It doesn't mean becoming cold, distant, or indifferent. It means becoming selective. It means choosing where your energy goes. It means understanding that you're not an infinite resource, that you can just pour into any old container. You are water in a desert, precious, vital, but limited. And if you just spill yourself everywhere, and you'll dry up, you'll just disappear. And then there's nothing left of you for anyone, not even for yourself. Alan Watts called this the wisdom of insecurity. Society has taught you that security comes from always being available, always accessible, always guaranteed. But that sense of security, it's an illusion. Because the more guaranteed you make yourself, the less you're actually valued. True security comes from the opposite. It comes from knowing that you don't need to be available to everyone to have worth. It comes from knowing that your absence can be just as powerful as your presence. It comes from knowing that you can say no and still be loved, maybe even more loved, because people don't love what's always there. They love what chooses to be there. They love what could be anywhere else, but chooses to be with them. They love the choice, not the obligation. When you're always available, you remove the choice. You become automatic, predictable, guaranteed, and what's guaranteed doesn't need to be earned, doesn't need to be valued, doesn't need to be cared for. But maybe you're thinking, okay, I get it, but just hold on, because there's a deeper layer to this that Alan Watts revealed. Being available all the time isn't just a strategic error, it's a symptom of something much deeper. It's a symptom of the existential fear that if you're not useful, you won't have value. That if you're not always present, you'll be forgotten. That if you say no, you'll be abandoned. This fear comes from the ego. The ego believes that it needs to do something, be somewhere to have worth. It believes that value is conditional, that it's earned, that it's maintained through constant effort. But Alan Watts taught something revolutionary. He taught that you don't need to do anything to have value. You already have value simply by existing. You are the universe experiencing itself. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to earn anything. You don't need to be available to anyone to be worthy of existence. That's the dissolution. When you realize you don't need to be always available to have value, you free yourself. You stop chasing, you stop overextending, you stop disappearing trying to appear, and then something magical happens. When you stop being always available, people start to value you, not because you're manipulating them, but because you're being real. You're being scarce, you're being water in the desert. There's a Zen story that Alan Watts loved to tell. A student asked a master, "Master, how can I make people value me?" And the master responded, "Stop trying to make people value you." The student was confused. "But master, if I don't try, they'll forget me." And the master smiled, "Only that which was remembered by obligation can be forgotten. What is remembered by choice is never forgotten." Do you understand what that means? As long as you're forcing your presence, people will remember you by obligation, by habit, by convenience. But the moment you stop forcing it, they'll forget you, because they never truly remembered you in the first place. But when you become scarce, when you choose where to be and where not to be, people start to remember you by choice, because your presence becomes an event, not a guarantee. And here's the second revelation that Alan Watts uncovered, something that's going to completely change how you see this. When you stop being always available, you're not just changing how people see you, you're changing who you are. Because being always available isn't just a behavior, it's an identity. It's a way of existing. And when you change that, you change everything. Think about how you feel when you're always available. You feel exhausted, empty, invisible, like you're carrying the weight of the world and no one notices. You resent people, but you can't say no. You feel trapped in a version of yourself that you built to please others. Now imagine how you'd feel if you weren't always available. If you could choose, if you could say no without guilt. If you could disappear for a while without feeling like you're abandoning someone. If you could exist for yourself without fear of being forgotten, you'd feel free, you'd feel whole, you'd feel real. And that's exactly what Alan Watts was trying to show you. That being always available isn't a virtue, it's a prison. It's you imprisoning yourself in the need for constant approval. It's you becoming a slave to the fear of being forgotten. But there's something even deeper going on here. Something that most people never realize. When you're always available, you're not just losing the respect of others, you're losing the respect of yourself. Because every time you say yes when you want to say no, you're betraying yourself. Every time you cancel your plans to be available, you're telling yourself that you don't matter. Every time you pour yourself into someone who doesn't retain you, you're confirming that you have no value, and your subconscious is watching. It's registering all of this, and it's creating a narrative about who you are, a narrative that you don't deserve to be chosen, that you don't deserve to be prioritized, that you don't deserve to be valued. Alan Watts would say that you're creating your own suffering, not because people treat you badly, but because you treat yourself badly. You're teaching yourself that you have no value, and then you attract people who confirm that belief. Remember the water. The water doesn't pour itself into containers that discard it. It simply follows its path. It doesn't resent. It doesn't take offense. It simply flows to where it's retained and moves away from where it's not. You need to learn to be like the water, not for strategy, but for wisdom, for self-respect, for self-love. And when you do that, something incredible happens. The people who discarded you start to seek you out. The people who took you for granted start to value you. The people who ignored you start to notice you, not because you're playing games, but because you've changed your energy. You've stopped being abundant and become scarce. You've stopped being guaranteed and become a choice. You've stopped being an obligation and become a desire. But wait. There's a twist in this story that's going to surprise you. You might think this is about manipulation, that it's about making people desire you through artificial scarcity, but it's not. Alan Watts wasn't teaching manipulation, he was teaching authenticity, because the truth is, you shouldn't be available to everyone. Alan Watts uncovered a truth that eludes most people their entire lives. He realized there's a deeply unsettling paradox in how we live. The more available you make yourself to everyone else, the less you exist for yourself. And the less you exist for yourself, the less you truly exist for anyone at all. It's like you completely deplete yourself trying to fill everyone else up. Not because you want to appear valuable, but because you don't have infinite energy. You don't have infinite time. You don't have an infinite life. Every time you say yes to someone, you're saying no to something else. Maybe to yourself. Maybe to someone who really matters. Maybe to something that brings you life instead of draining you. Alan Watts taught that life is like a song. It's not trying to get anywhere, it's simply happening. And when you're always available to everyone, you're not playing your song. You're playing everyone else's song. And in the end, no one hears any music at all, just noise. You need to play your song, and to play your song, you need to choose where your energy goes. You need to be selective. You need to embrace the scarcity principle. Not because you're better than others, but because you're finite. And the finite needs to choose, needs to prioritize, needs to say no in order to say yes to what really matters. There's a concept in Buddhism that Alan Watts explored extensively. It's called equanimity. It's not indifference. It's the ability to be present without losing yourself, to care without draining yourself, to love without dissolving. Equanimity is knowing that you can withdraw without guilt, that you can say no without being cruel, that you can choose yourself without being selfish, because you understand that self-care is not selfish. It's wisdom. It's a necessity. It's survival. When you're always available, you lose equanimity. You dissolve into the needs of others. You become a hostage to expectations. You lose yourself completely. But when you become selectively available, you gain equanimity. You keep yourself whole. You preserve yourself. You continue existing. And it's only when you exist that you can really be present, because you can't give what you don't have. You can't be present if you don't exist. You can't love someone if you've lost yourself in the process. You've just dissolved one of the biggest illusions that society has sold you. The illusion that being always available is love, when in reality, it's self-destruction in the last few minutes. You've seen how Alan Watts revealed that scarcity is not selfishness, it's the wisdom of nature itself. This truth about availability that Zen teaches has been forgotten by Western culture for centuries, which has confused constant presence with value. Few channels delve into this profound philosophy because it's easier to sell you productivity than to teach you to exist. Each video like this requires years of understanding Zen, of dissolving illusions, of going against what everyone believes. That super thanks button down there isn't just financial support, it's you saying, this dissolution is real for me. When you click that golden heart, you validate this search for truth instead of comfort. You're not just a spectator, you're a seeker of truth. Be part of those who choose paradox instead of comfort. Together, we are dissolving the illusions of the separate ego. Now, how do you really live this? How do you become selectively available without becoming cold? How do you apply effortless action flow state in practice? Alan Watts had a way of explaining this that dissolved all the confusion. He said you don't need to become unavailable. You need to become naturally selective, like everything in nature is. Observe the sun. It doesn't shine 24 hours a day for all places at the same time. It has its cycle. It appears, illuminates, warms, and then withdraws. And it's exactly because it withdraws that people wait for it. It's because it's cyclical that it's precious. It's because it's not always there that people stop to admire the sunset. You need to be like the sun. Appear fully when you appear. Illuminate completely when you're present, and then withdraw, without guilt, knowing that you'll return at the right time. It's not about punishing people by withdrawing your presence. It's about honoring your natural cycle. It's about understanding that you can't illuminate the entire world at the same time. You need to choose where your light goes. There's another metaphor that Alan Watts used, the mountain. The mountain doesn't go to the people go to the mountain, and the harder it is to get to it, the more people value it when they arrive. The more they remember the experience, the more they are transformed by the effort. If the mountain went to the people, it would no longer be a mountain, it would just be common ground, and no one would travel to see common ground. You don't need to go to everyone. You need to become a mountain, something that's worth the effort, something that people choose to climb, something that transforms those who make the journey to you. First, understand that this doesn't happen overnight. You've spent years building the identity of being always available. You won't deconstruct that in a day, but you can start now. Start small. The next time someone asks you for something, pause before answering. Don't answer automatically. Don't say yes by reflex. Pause. Breathe. Ask yourself, do I really want to do this? Or am I doing it out of fear, guilt, or obligation? If it's out of fear, guilt, or obligation, say no, or at least say, let me think about it and I'll get back to you. You don't owe anyone an immediate answer. You don't owe anyone being always available. Second, start creating spaces of unavailability. Choose moments when you're not accessible. It could be an hour a day. It could be a day a week. It could be turning off notifications. It could be not responding to messages immediately. And here's what's important. Don't justify yourself. Don't explain. Don't apologize. Just be unavailable. Water doesn't explain why it doesn't fill certain containers. It simply doesn't fill them. Third, observe what happens. Observe how you feel. You'll probably feel guilt at first. You'll feel fear of being abandoned. You'll feel anxiety about missing something. That's normal. It's the ego resisting change. But keep going, because soon you'll start to feel something different. You'll start to feel space. You'll start to feel that you exist again. You'll start to feel that you matter. And then something magical will happen. People will start to treat you differently. Not everyone. Some will pull away. And that's good. Because the people who pull away when you stop being always available are the people who never truly valued you. They only valued what you did for them. But some people will get closer. They'll value you more. They'll respect you more. Because you're showing that you respect yourself. You're showing that you have value. You're showing that you choose where to be. And these are the people who matter. The ones who stay when you become scarce. The ones who seek you out when you're not always available. Those who value you because you choose to be there, not because you're obligated to be. Alan Watts used to say, you can't force a flower to bloom. You can only create the right conditions and let nature do its thing. The same goes for relationships. You can't force people to value you. You can only create the right conditions. And one of those conditions is to be scarce, to be selective, to be like water. Fourth, reconnect with yourself. Because the reason you're always available for others is that you're unavailable for you. You don't listen to yourself. You don't respect yourself. You don't prioritize yourself. Start spending time alone, not as punishment, not as isolation, but as reconnection. Start asking, what do I want? What do I feel? What do I need? Not what others want from me, but what I want for me. And when you start hearing those answers, start honoring them. Start doing what you want. Start feeling what you feel. Start supplying what you need. Not always, not selfishly, but in a balanced way, in a wise way. Fifth, understand that this isn't about abandoning people. It's not about becoming distant or cold. It's about being present when you are present and absent when you need to be absent. It's about quality instead of quantity. It's about choice instead of obligation. Saying no is saying yes to yourself. Self-care is not selfish. The people who truly love you will understand this. They'll respect this. They'll love you even more because you're being real, not performing availability. And the people who don't understand, they never truly loved you. They loved what you did. They loved the convenience. They loved the guarantee. And when you remove that, they reveal themselves. It hurts at first, but it's liberating in the end, because you finally see who's really there for you and who's there for what you offer. Alan Watts would say this is awakening, seeing things as they are, not as you wish they were. And when you see things as they are, you free yourself from illusions. And when you free yourself from illusions, you can finally live for real. There's a final paradox that Alan Watts loved to explore. He said that when you stop trying to be loved, you become lovable. When you stop trying to be interesting, you become interesting. When you stop trying to be special, you become special. Why? Because the attempt is already the evidence that you don't believe you already are those things. The attempt carries fear, and fear repels. But when you simply are, when you stop trying, you become magnetic. It's like that person at a party who isn't trying to impress anyone, who isn't running from group to group trying to be seen, who's comfortable alone, talking deeply with one person, or simply observing. Everyone is drawn to that person. Why? Because they don't need anyone. And exactly because of that, everyone wants to be near them. You need to become that person, not at the party, but in life. The person who doesn't need to be always available to feel valuable. The person who's comfortable alone. The person who chooses where to be instead of being everywhere. And here's the truth that will hurt before it liberates. The people who complain when you stop being always available are the people who were using you. Not necessarily with malice, but they were. They were used to the convenience of you. And when you remove the convenience, They reveal that was all it was. The people who really love you will breathe a sigh of relief when you stop being always available. Because they knew you were losing yourself. They knew you were pouring yourself into empty spaces. They knew you weren't okay, even if you smiled and said you were. And when you finally create boundaries, when you finally retreat to find yourself, they'll support you because they truly love you. And whoever truly loves you wants you to exist, not that you disappear serving. So here's what will happen when you stop being always available. Some people will complain. They'll say you've changed. They'll say you're distant. They'll say you're not the same anymore. And you'll smile because they're right. You have changed. You're not the same anymore. You're no longer the person who disappeared trying to appear. You're no longer the person who poured themselves into empty containers. You're no longer the person who existed for everyone, except for themselves. Now, you are water. You flow to where you should flow. You retreat from where you shouldn't be. You fill what's empty and leave the rest. And you do this without guilt, without fear, without explanations. Because you finally understood what Alan Watts spent his life teaching. That you don't need to be everywhere to have value, that you don't need to be everything to everyone to be loved, that you don't need to disappear to matter, you just need to be, and when you are, you naturally attract what resonates with who you really are, not by effort, not by manipulation, but by resonance, by authenticity, by truth. And that's the biggest transformation that can happen in your life. Not when you achieve more, but when you stop losing yourself, not when you're everywhere, but when you're totally where you choose to be, not when you're everything to everyone, but when you're you, for you. That's the wisdom of Zen. That's the dissolution that Alan Watts offered. That's the freedom that comes when you stop being available for what doesn't serve you and become fully present for what makes you exist. 99% of people are too available and invisible at the same time. Do you have the courage to become unavailable to what doesn't serve you? Comment water if you understand that you need to flow, not pour yourself out. Or comment on which moment in the video you felt your ego resist. I want to know what paradox dissolved something in you.